Chapter 27, Dictatorships and the Second World War. Part 3, The Rise of Adolf Hitler and Nazi Germany. Unfortunately, Nazis are a pretty unfunny subject. Nazis might be the least funny subject in the world. It is as funny of a subject as Delaware is an exciting place to visit.
Being able to be magically whisked away to Delaware. Hi, I'm in Delaware.
But I'll do my best to make this interesting. Germany was like Italy in the sense that it was a new nation formed in the late 19th century. Germany emerged from World War I greatly disappointed. It was, of course, the loser of the war and had to accept the humiliating Treaty of Versailles, which placed sole blame of the war on Germany. But let's talk about the situation that allowed the National Socialists to rise to power. When you're talking about Nazis, that invariably means you're talking about Adolf Hitler. And two things probably stand out most about his early life. The first was his ambition to be a painter. Here you see one of the watercolor landscapes that he did, and you can see that he had some skill. But he was rejected twice to the prestigious Vienna Academy. The second is that he served in World War I. Hitler was born Austrian but immigrated to Germany in 1913 before serving in World War I. But let's now move on to what National Socialism was all about. What did Nazis believe?
I mean, say what you want about the tenets of National Socialism, dude. At least it's an ethos.
Yeah.
Adolf Hitler was very much a product of his time. While in Vienna, the mayor of the city was extremely popular, but also deeply anti-Semitic. Hitler was absorbing the dominant worldview of the time, which was of social Darwinism, and Hitler believed that the races of the world were pitted in combat, and that the German race, the German people, needed to come out ahead. As we've discussed before, anti-Semitism has a long, ugly history in Europe. Hitler was very much brought up in that and tapped into that in his rise during the 1920s. So Hitler joins the German Workers' Party in 1919, and this party is a very minor party in the early 1920s. But Hitler forms a group known as the Brown Shirts. These were modeled after Mussolini's black shirts. And these group basically operated as street thugs and as Hitler's personal army. In 1923, the current government of Germany, the Weimar Republic, was on the verge of collapse. And so Hitler, with his brown shirts, led what was called the Beer Hall Putsch, which was a poorly attempted uprising in Munich modeled after the March on Rome in 1922. Unlike the March on Rome, where Mussolini was named the Prime Minister of Italy, Hitler was thrown into this jail. He would only serve a short time in this prison, but he would emerge from it a minor political figure. The Nazis would do poorly in the next election, and in 1925, this was the view most Germans had of Adolf Hitler. He really was a bit of a laughingstock at that point. He did use the time to write the book Mein Kampf, which outlined the main philosophy of Nazism. It set out the ideas of racial purification and the Germans' race need for Lebensraum, or living space. Hitler was influenced by a number of forces, including Henry Ford and anti-Semitism in the United States. Hitler brought only 3 books with him to prison. One of those 3 was a collection of anti-Semitic essays edited and published by Henry Ford. Another famous anti-Semite in American culture was
Roger Myers Sr., the gentle genius behind Itchy and Scratchy, loved and cared about almost all the peoples of the world. And he, in return, was beloved by the world, except in 1938, when he was criticized for his controversial cartoon, Nazi Supermen Are Our Superiors.
Of course, I'm referring to the fictional character of Roger Myers Sr. in the television series The Simpsons, and not a real person or historical figure, perhaps the founder of one of the most important media companies in the country currently.
Shh! You wanna get sued?
So in the book, Mein Kampf, Hitler lays out the concept of a Führer, or supreme leader. This is one of the ways in which Nazism clearly reflects the ideas of fascism and puts it firmly in that right-wing camp. They de-emphasized anti-capitalist sentiments, so even though the party has the name socialism in it, it became fiercely anti-communist, as you can see in this 1930 political poster, which is equating Marxism with Judaism, a common theme in anti-Semitic tropes. Hitler and the Nazis began drawing bigger and bigger crowds, but the main thing which turned the political fortune of the Nazis was the fact that the Great Depression set in 1929. Germany had experienced a period of economic recovery in the mid-20s, but with the U.S. downturn, the world sank into a massive depression. And with that, you saw voters turn to more extreme parties, both on the left and on the right. Hitler and the Nazis began drawing bigger and bigger crowds, but the main thing which turned the political fortune of the Nazis was the fact that the Great Depression set in 1929. Germany had experienced a period of economic recovery in the mid-20s, but with the U.S. downturn, the world sank into a massive depression. And with that, you saw voters turn to more extreme parties, both on the left and on the right. So the moderate parties begin to lose out. The communist and social democrats failed to really be able to come to any sort of agreement between the two. And so you see Hitler is able to win over the more conservative politicians who fear this rising tide of left-wing political movement. The president is a guy by the name of Paul von Hindenburg, and he is a commanding figure in German politics at this point in time. He also is the guy for what this was named after.
Oh, 400 or 500 feet into the sky. It's a terrific crash, ladies and gentlemen. The smoke and the flames now, and the flame is crashing to the ground, not quite to the mooring mast. All the humanity and all the passengers screaming around it.
So the Nazis were the largest party in the German parliament, the Reichstag, in the 1932 election. They didn't win a majority of votes, but they were by far the largest party represented. And so Hindenburg named Adolf Hitler Chancellor in 1932. And so Hitler is going to move very similar to Mussolini to slowly disassemble the liberal democratic government that existed in this fledgling country. You're going to see Hitler pass the Enabling Acts, which gave him a great deal of power. Now, the pretext for this bill was the Reichstag fire, which happened in 1933. We really don't know who set the fire for certain, but what is for certain is that Hitler used that by blaming a Jewish radical Marxist for setting the fire. And so, in essence, Germany becomes a one-party Nazi state. But it is really kind of complicated because the way in which Hitler and the Nazis did this was by infiltrating the bureaucracy of the government. And so in essence, they set up a dual government where there was both Nazi party and also official government positions. And these overlapping responsibilities resulted in a very disorganized government. But they were very successful in constructing this National Socialist society. The Nazis went about eliminating political enemies.
Nobody expects the Spanish Inquisition!
I had to check if you were still with me. The Nazis' first step was to eliminate political enemies. They arrested communists, social democrats, union leaders. They placed them in concentration camps. They outlawed strikes, and they abolished independent labor unions. Hitler then turned his attention to purging some of the more radical elements of the Nazi Party, including the left wing. This purge included the leadership of the stormtroopers, otherwise known as the SA. On June 30th, 1934, Hitler's elite personal guard, the SS, arrested and executed about another 100 SA leaders and political enemies. And this is where Heinrich Himmler and the SS take over as the political police force and will be in charge of the concentration camp system. The Nazis began acting on this vision of racial purity by beginning persecuting groups that they felt were incapable of contributing to this master race. They had this scientific view, really pseudo-scientific view of eugenics. This racial hatred towards not just Jewish people, but Slavic people, Sinti and Romani. You might know them as gypsies, but that is kind of considered a pejorative term. But the Nazis were successful in making a large numbers of Germans believe this.
It's a fact. Super intelligent life forms visit the Earth regularly to brag.
You're aware, of course, that we're super intelligent, aren't you? I mean, look at our big foreheads.
You know why they're so big? Because we have big brains. And we have super intelligence.
Okay, so they didn't really believe in the alien part, but they really did measure people's skulls and think that the shape and size of people's heads proved the intelligence and superiority of the Aryan people. Sterilization laws were passed to try to carry out this vision of racial purity. 400,000 so-called undesirable citizens were sterilized against their will. Laws are beginning to be passed against Jewish people. First, by the end of 1934, most Jewish professionals had been banned from their occupation, and in 1935, the very infamous Nuremberg laws are passed, and it classified people as being Jewish if they had 3 or more Jewish grandparents, and it outlawed marriage and sexual relations between Jews and those defined as Germans, and it basically deprived Jewish people of citizenship regardless of how long they had been living there. In late 1938, Kristallnacht, which is now known as the Night of Broken Glass, this was an assault on Jews. This is a well-organized wave of violence. Nazi gangs smashed windows. They looted Jewish-owned shops. They destroyed homes and synagogues. And they killed dozens of Jews. As I said,
Delaware. Hi. I'm in Delaware.
Hitler had promised the masses economic recovery, and he delivered on that promise by launching massive public work programs to help pull Germany out of the Depression. One such program was the building of the Autobahn. By 1938, unemployment had fallen to 2%, and the standard of living for the average worker had increased moderately. Business profits had risen sharply, and more importantly, you saw average Germans taking part in Aryanization. Ordinary Germans benefited from the persecution of Jews because as Jews were forced out of their jobs, homes, and businesses, Germans stepped into their places and took over. Hitler was also very interested in the youth. He established Hitler Youth Groups, which tried to organize and educate the young people to be fully committed to the Nazi vision of Germany. Hitler, like Mussolini, saw himself as a conservative force against the tide of liberal feminism. He sought to liberate women from women's liberation, and there were small resistance to the Nazis, but overwhelmingly, a majority of Germans went along with Adolf Hitler and his plan.
Want to hear something? It's a fact. You can get blood from a stone. You just have to throw it hard enough. It's a fact.
Germany withdrew from the League of Nations in October of 1933. In March of 1935, Hitler proclaimed that Germany would no longer abide by the disarmament clauses of the Treaty of Versailles, and he began to officially build up the German army. Britain adopted a policy of appeasement under Neville Chamberlain, which he has become somewhat infamous for at this point. Hitler and Mussolini, as we talked in the last lecture, formed a close alliance after Mussolini's successful invasion of Ethiopia. Also at the same point in time, Spain broke out into a civil war where the nationalists under General Francisco Franco are going to win a victory for the fascists. Hitler and Mussolini sent aid to the nationalist forces, and with that success, Hitler began to plan for expansion of Germany. Austria was seized without any actual fighting, and Hitler then began to move against the Sudetenland and Czechoslovakia. He caused an international crisis in which the Prime Minister of Great Britain, Neville Chamberlain, flew to Munich, and the Munich conference, it was decided that the Sudetenland would be given to Germany under the promise that that was going to be the last territorial demand that Hitler made. Neville Chamberlain hailed the deal very famously as saying that he had achieved peace with honor here. And as we did in some of the readings, it's perhaps a bit unfair that this is what Chamberlain is known for, having experienced the horrors of World War I, wanting to avoid another one, isn't completely understandable. But with that, after eventually Hitler takes all of Czechoslovakia, and it's at this point that Great Britain and France draw the line in the sand. They state that if Hitler moves into Poland, that they will declare war, that Hitler doesn't take these warnings very seriously, and German armies roll into Poland on September 1st, 1939. Britain and France declare war pretty much immediately after, and this is usually seen as the official start of World War II. We will talk about World War II next time.
Huzzah!